Lyra Voss had always considered herself a bit of an adrenaline junkie. Strapped into the captain's chair of the SS Black Humor, she was getting her fix. The ship bucked and groaned like a reluctant mule as it punched through the dense ice and rock of Saturn's rings. "Just another day in paradise," she muttered, gripping the armrests like they owed her money. "Captain," came a voice through the static-filled comms, "we've got a situation." That was Sergei, her right-hand man, or as she lovingly referred to him, the human equivalent of a bummed-out weather report. If Sergei sounded concerned, Lyra knew it was time to panic or at least consider it. "What's going on, Sergei? Another meteor shower? Or is the coffee machine on the fritz again?" Lyra quipped, flipping a switch to stabilize the ship. The black humor centered itself begrudgingly, like a drunk finding his footing. "Neither. We found something," Sergei replied, his voice tinged with that special blend of dread and curiosity. "An alien structure." "Alien structure," Lyra repeated, her sarcasm dialed down to a simmer. "You mean like a UFO or a 'my god it's full of stars' kind of thing?" "More like an ancient temple," Sergei replied. The words hung in the air, heavy and foreboding like an overdue credit card bill. Lyra sighed, cracking her knuckles one by one. "All right, suit up and prepare for a little sightseeing. Just remember, if it asks if we want to hear the gospel, say no." The team assembled in the airlock, their suits sealing with audible hisses that reminded Lyra of a grandmother's disapproving sigh. Besides Sergei, there was Trix, the ship's engineer, who had a remarkable talent for breaking things before fixing them, and Caldwell, the science officer whose inquisitive nature often led them into more trouble than curiosity warranted. "Ready to meet our new alien overlords?" Trix asked, adjusting her helmet. Her voice crackled through the comms with an enthusiasm that could only be described as misplaced. "If they are anything like my ex, we'll probably be worshipping them in no time," Caldwell joked, checking his oxygen levels. Lyra couldn't help but chuckle, knowing full well that Caldwell's ex seemed like the kind who'd demand absolute devotion and a sacrifice of chocolate and compliments. The airlock depressurized with a shudder, and the team floated out, tethered to the black humor by what felt like the universe's weakest bungee cord. Saturn loomed above them, casting a ghostly pallor over everything, the solar system's grand reminder that beauty and danger often share a bed. The structure itself jutted out from the rings, a monolith of unknown origin and probable bad intentions. Its surface was covered in strange symbols, each one seeming to pulse with a rhythm that matched Lyra's own heartbeat, or maybe her paranoia. "It's like a goth kid's notebook," she commented. "All that's missing is the scribbled poetry." "I've seen this before," Sergei said, running his gloved fingers over the symbols. "It's ancient. Pre-human by the looks of it." "Well, we're certainly not in Kansas anymore," Trix added, her tone a cocktail of awe and sarcasm. As they floated closer, Lyra could feel a strange energy emanating from the temple. It wasn't the kind of energy that powered lights or cooked your dinner. No, it had a more sinister feel, like the hum of an impending migraine or the uneasy calm before a corporate meeting. "Anybody else getting the feeling we're about to star in a really bad horror movie?" Caldwell asked. Lyra nodded, though she knew no one could see it. The temple's entrance loomed ahead, a gaping maw that seemed to swallow light and hope in equal measure. "Just remember," Lyra said, "if anything jumps out at us, Sergei's the bait." "Thanks, Captain," Sergei replied, his voice as dry as a desert planet. They activated their headlamps, the beams cutting through the darkness like knives through soft butter. The inside of the temple was a labyrinth of hallways and chambers, each more foreboding than the last. Strange pictograms adorned the walls, depicting scenes that would have given even the most hardcore horror fans nightmares. "Looks like someone had a real penchant for the macabre," Trix said, stopping to examine a particularly gruesome mural. It depicted humanoid figures cowering before a towering shadow with too many eyes and not enough compassion. "I'd say they were overcompensating for something," Lyra replied, moving on, partly to keep from lingering on the disturbing images and partly because she was pretty sure she was being watched by some unseen force. "Let's find the source of that energy," Caldwell suggested, his scientific curiosity getting the better of his common sense. "It's coming from deeper within, isn't it always?" Lyra mused, leading the way. "Here's hoping it's not another cosmic entity that wants to gobble us up." They ventured further into the temple, the oppressive atmosphere weighing on them like a bad conscience. The air grew thicker, the darkness more suffocating. It was as if the structure itself was whispering secrets of despair and doom into their ears. Finally, they entered a vast chamber, the source of the energy unmistakable, a pulsating crystal at the center, floating above an altar made of something that looked suspiciously like bones. "Well, that doesn't scream friendly," Trix commented, eyeing the crystal with a mix of awe and trepidation. "What do you think it does?" "Probably something terrible," Lyra replied. You know how these ancient civilizations are always leaving dangerous artifacts lying around like booby traps for future idiots like us. Sergei approached the crystal cautiously. It's beautiful in a this could kill us all kind of way, he said, reaching out but stopping short of touching it. Feels almost alive. Alive, Caldwell echoed. Great. Last thing we need is sentient crystals with a taste for human souls. And here I thought my last relationship was draining, Trix quipped. Focus, people, Lyra snapped, although the humor was a necessary balm for her nerves. If this thing is the source of the energy, we need to figure out what it's doing here and why it's connected to our nightmares. Maybe it's like an intergalactic dream catcher, Sergei suggested. Except, instead of catching dreams, it feeds them to a monster that thrives on misery. Now there's a comforting thought, Lyra said dryly. But you're not wrong. We've got reports from all over the system about shared dreams. This could be the cause. So what do we do? Caldwell asked, his voice tinged with genuine concern. We can't just leave it here. Lyra took a deep breath, her mind racing. We document everything and get back to the ship. HQ needs to know about this. We can't handle it alone. And here I was hoping we'd just blow it up and call it a day, Trix sighed. If only things were that simple, Lyra replied, leading the team back the way they came. Let's move. I don't want to stick around long enough to find out what else might be lurking in this hellhole. As they retraced their path through the temple, an unsettling noise echoed in the corridors behind them, a low, guttural growl that made Lyra's blood run cold. Did anyone else hear that? Sergei asked, his voice elevated to the pitch of impending doom. Of course we did, Lyra shot back. It's just our friendly neighborhood death monster coming to say hello. Don't stop, Caldwell urged. I really don't want to meet whatever that is. Agreed, Lyra said, quickening her pace. Let's just hope it doesn't have the ability to open airlocks. They made it back to the black humor, the temple's entrance receding into the distance as they sealed themselves safely inside. As the ship's systems powered up, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling they'd just poked a very large, very hungry bear. So, what now, Captain? Trix asked, unhooking her helmet with a sigh of relief. Now, Lyra said, settling back into her seat, we pray to whatever gods are listening that we get out of here alive, and that HQ has a plan that doesn't involve us being eaten by nightmares. But as the black humor turned away, she couldn't help but wonder if they were leaving with more than they bargained for, and if the nightmares would follow. The SS Black Humor rattled like a maraca in a bad mariachi band as it made its way back toward the ominous temple hidden among Saturn's rings. Lyra Voss, captain and part-time adrenaline junkie, was in her element. Her crew, however, was less than thrilled. The comms crackled with static and complaints as the team prepared for round 2 with whatever ancient nightmare awaited them. Back so soon, Sergei's voice droned over the intercom, sounding as thrilled as a funeral director at a disco. It's like we can't get enough of this haunted house in space. You know how it is, Sergei, Lyra replied, tightening her helmet. Once you get a taste of cosmic horror, you just have to come back for seconds. The team huddled in the airlock again, their suits sealing with that familiar hiss of disapproval. Trix, the engineer who could break anything and fix most things, was fiddling with a device that looked suspiciously like it was held together by stubbornness and chewing gum. You bring that thing along to scare the aliens back into their holes, asked Finn Ralston, their newly introduced tech specialist. He had the demeanor of a man who'd seen one too many things go wrong in space and the social skills of a caffeinated squirt. If it works, Trix shot back. Besides, it's either this or I start whacking things with a wrench, and last I checked, the warranty doesn't cover intentional bludgeoning. Dr. Mira Solis, the xenobiologist who'd joined the team for this particular suicide mission, adjusted her gear with precision. Her eyes, sharp and probing, scanned the team like she was taking mental notes for a thesis on idiocy in interstellar exploration. Let's make sure we're all clear on the objective, Dr. Solis said, her tone as crisp as a new credit card. We're here to identify the device and ascertain its purpose, preferably without getting sucked into a galactic nightmare. Good plan, Lyra nodded. If anyone asks, we're just the curious morons who stumbled onto their front porch. The airlock opened and they floated out, tethered yet again to the black humor. The universe loomed around them, vast and indifferent. As they approached the temple, it seemed even more foreboding than before, if that was possible. The entrance gaped like the maw of some ancient beast, ready to swallow them whole. Here we go again, Sergei muttered, his voice carrying the enthusiasm of someone about to attend their own trial. Inside, the temple was as dark and oppressive as before. The air felt thick, as if choked with centuries of secrets and bad intentions. The team switched on their headlamps, the beams slicing through the gloom. The pictograms on the walls seemed to move in the shadows, telling tales that no one wanted to hear. Finn, any insights into this graffiti from hell? Lyra asked, glancing at the symbols. Finn squinted, pulling out a handheld scanner that beeped and booped in a symphony of uselessness. Looks like we're staring at a manual for a device, or maybe it's an ancient alien version of IKEA instructions. Either way, it's not in any language I know. Aliens with flat-pack technology, Trix chuckled. Imagine the horror. No wonder they went extinct. They pressed on, following the ominous thrum that seemed to echo from the temple's heart. It was the kind of sound that promised bad things to those who dared to seek it out. The path wound its way deeper into the structure, the temperature dropping with each step. Finally, they arrived at a chamber that seemed pulled from a nightmare. At its center was the crystal they'd seen before, now unmistakably tethered to an elaborate apparatus that hummed with malevolent energy. Well, that's not ominous at all, Sergei said, eyeing the setup. Looks like a torture device built by a sci-fi novelist with too much time on their hands. Dr. Solis stepped forward, studying the device with a mix of awe and horror. This is extraordinary. It's designed to capture brain waves, specifically those generated during nightmares. So it's a dream vacuum. Sounds like something my therapist would love, Trix said, her voice echoing in the chamber. Yeah, but instead of sucking up your childhood trauma, it's probably turning it into fuel for some cosmic horror, Lyra added. I guess even nightmares have a market value. Caldwell, intrigued and horrified, peered closer at the crystal. It's like it's feeding off the fear, converting it into some kind of energy, maybe even using it to sustain itself. Great, Finn said, his sarcasm sharp enough to cut through the tension. We've found the universe's worst recycling program. Turning our nightmares into green energy. But why? Sergei asked. What's the point of all this? Power, Dr. Solis replied simply. Fear is a primal, powerful emotion. Harness it correctly and it can fuel entire civilizations or destroy them. Or, just ruin your day, Trix added. Either way, it's impressive and terrifying. Lyra stepped closer to the device, careful not to touch anything. So what's our move? We can't just leave this thing running. It's like leaving a loaded gun on a playground. Should we try to disable it? Caldwell suggested. Maybe disrupt the connection. Disabling ancient alien tech, Finn mused. Sounds like a recipe for disaster, but I'm game if everyone else is. Lyra weighed their options. All right, let's see what we can do, but carefully. One wrong move and we might end up giving this thing a boost instead of a shutdown. They circled the device, each member of the team analyzing different components, trying to piece together a plan that didn't end in a spectacular explosion. Here's the main control panel, Trix said, pointing to a series of alien symbols that glowed with a sinister light. If we can disrupt the power flow, it might just shut down. And if it doesn't, Sergei asked, as he fiddled with a set of wires that looked like they'd been designed by a sadistic cat. Then we find out what it feels like to be in a blender set to puree, Lyra replied. Any volunteers? Let's just hope it's not too sensitive, Dr. Solis added, her fingers deftly working over the panel. I'd rather not join the ranks of cosmic horror stories. The team worked in tense silence, the air thick with anticipation and dread. Minutes felt like hours as they carefully disconnected components, rerouting power and hoping they weren't triggering some ancient defense mechanism. Almost there, Trix murmured, her fingers a blur as she connected wires with the precision of a seasoned surgeon. Just one more, the room shuddered, the device's hum escalating to a fever pitch, then abruptly cutting out. The crystal flickered, its light dimming to a dull glow. Did we do it? Caldwell asked, his voice a whisper in the sudden silence. Looks like it, Lyra replied, relief and disbelief mingling in her voice. We've managed not to blow ourselves up. Always a plus. Well, that was anticlimactic, Finn said, shaking his head. Here I was expecting some dramatic finish, like a supernova or at least a light show. Be glad we're not part of the fireworks, Sergei chimed in. I'd rather live to complain another day. They gathered their gear, the oppressive weight of the temple lifting slightly as they prepared to make their exit. But Lyra couldn't shake the feeling they weren't quite out of danger yet. Let's get back to the ship, she said, leading the way out. I want to put as much distance between us and this cosmic nightmare fuel station as possible. As they retraced their steps, the shadows seemed to writhe on the walls, whispering threats in a language only nightmares understood. The team kept close, their nerves frayed but intact. The black humor loomed ahead, a beacon of safety and sarcasm in the hostile void. Once inside, Lyra sank into her chair, the familiar hum of the ship's engines a comfort she hadn't known she'd miss. All right, folks, she announced over the comms. Let's get out of here before something decides we're worth the trouble. The ship powered up, the engines roaring to life as they pulled away from the temple. Lyra watched the structure recede into the distance, wondering what other secrets it held and if they'd truly managed to stop whatever it had been doing. Think we'll dream better tonight? Trix asked, leaning back with a tired grin. Let's hope so, Caldwell replied, because I've had enough of nightmares to last a lifetime. Yeah, and if not, Sergei added, at least we've got a hell of a story to tell. Assuming anyone believes us, Lyra chuckled, her eyes on the stars beyond. Well, I guess we'll see. Just remember, if they ask if we'd like to hear the gospel, still say no. And with that, the SS Black Humor sailed away, leaving the temple and its secrets behind, their laughter echoing in the void like a defiant anthem amidst the stars. The SS Black Humor, an iron-laden name for a ship, drifted silently through the emptiness, casting long shadows on the rocky particles of Saturn's rings. Inside, the crew was anything but silent. They were a band of humans, irreverent as they come, each with a knack for sarcasm and a healthy disrespect for authority. If the universe was a joke, they were the punchline. "Nice to see we didn't get vaporized back there," said Lyra Voss, their intrepid captain, as she leaned back in her cockpit seat, a seat that creaked ominously, like it might convert her butt into a black hole at any moment. Sergei, ever the optimist, stretched out with a yawn. "Sure, boss. But who feels like sticking around to see if that place has a return policy? Yeah, I'd rather not push our luck," added Trix, her hands already fidgeting with a tool she'd pulled from nowhere. "Besides, this ship hasn't shown the slightest hint of exploding in the past IOR. Wouldn't want to ruin the streak." Finn Ralston, slouched over his console, looked up with a face that could curdle milk. "We might be the grittiest band of idiots this side of the Milky Way, but even we have limits." The comms crackled with static, its usual state of existence, as Dr. Mira Solis chimed in from the lab with a voice as sharp as a scalpel. "Let's focus. I've got some readings here that make me think we're not as done with that temple as we thought." "Readings?" Caldwell perked up, his scientific curiosity piqued. He had the enthusiasm of a child with a new toy, except his toys didn't usually threaten death by cosmic horror. "Like what? Like we may have triggered an ancient security system," Dr. Solis replied. "It's sending out some kind of signal." "Well, color me unsurprised," Lyra sighed. "Of course the temple has security. Probably a cosmic leash for curious idiots like us." Finn tapped at his console, bringing up a hologram of the temple. "So, what now? We get roped back in like spaced-out yo-yos." "Something like that," Dr. Solis said. "The signal is getting stronger, and I'm picking up unusual energy fluctuations in our vicinity. It's as if something's trying to pull us in." Lyra cursed under her breath, watching as the ship's trajectory subtly shifted without her input. "I'm guessing we don't have much choice in the matter. Finn, can you give me any good news?" Finn's fingers flew over the controls. "Define good news. In a cosmic sense, we're all just stardust, which is kind of beautiful. But in the immediate sense, nope, nothing good." "We're being pulled back." "Great," Sergei mumbled. "Just what I wanted, a return trip to the temple that tried to eat us." The SS Black Humor shuddered slightly as it altered its course, the temple growing larger in the viewport. The crew exchanged glances, each silently cursing their luck but too resigned to do much else. As they drew closer, the temple seemed to pulse with a malevolent glow, as if it were eagerly anticipating their return. The shadows it cast seemed to curl and twist, taunting them. "All right," Lyra said, her voice a mix of determination and exhaustion. "We're going back in. Everyone suit up and prepare for whatever fresh hell awaits." The team donned their gear once more, each with a sense of foreboding tempered by grim humor. It was the only way to handle the absurdity of their situation without losing their minds. "Just remember," Trix quipped as she adjusted her helmet, "if anything asks if we want to hear the gospel, the answer is still a solid no." Back in the temple, the atmosphere was even more oppressive than before. They stepped inside, their footsteps echoing ominously. The walls, with their shifting pictograms, seemed to mock their return. "Feels like we're walking into our own funeral," Sergei muttered. "Cheer up," Lyra replied. "At least we're getting good exercise, or at least we will when we're running for our lives." They followed the path back to the chamber with the crystal, the air growing colder with each step. Once inside, they found the device still inoperative, but the crystal itself was surrounded by an eerie glow. "It's like it's waiting for us," Dr. Solis said, her voice tinged with awe and trepidation. "More like it's pissed we tried to shut it down," Finn added, squinting at the shifting light patterns. Caldwell approached cautiously, his curiosity winning over caution. "We need to understand what it's doing. If it's a security system, there has to be a way to deactivate it permanently." "Right," Trix said, eyeing the device with the same suspicion she reserved for malfunctioning engine parts, because ancient alien tech is known for being user-friendly. As they examined the device, the chamber's atmosphere grew palpably tense, the walls seeming to close in, and then, as if the temple had grown tired of waiting, the nightmares began. It started subtly, a creeping unease that wormed its way into their minds. Their thoughts grew muddled, and reality itself seemed to twist and warp. Lyra shook her head, trying to clear the fog that settled in. "Anyone else feel like they've swallowed a bad trip?" "Yeah," Sergei replied, blinking rapidly. "And it's not the fun kind." The visions hit like a freight train, flashes of their worst fears twisted and amplified. The temple seemed to feed on their terror, the crystal glowing brighter with each passing second. Trix stumbled back, her mind assaulted by images of mechanical beasts rising from the depths of space, ready to devour her. "What the hell is this thing doing?" It's using our fears against us, Dr. Soli said, her voice strained as she fought against the images of alien creatures dissecting her like a lab specimen. The device is amplifying them, drawing power from our nightmares. Finn was already working, his fingers racing over his handheld scanner. We need to disrupt the connection again, but if it's locking us in with these nightmares, we might need to counteract the signal. If we don't, we might end up as permanent guests, Lyra added, her mind fighting the relentless tide of despair. Caldwell, despite the chaos in his head, managed to focus on the crystal. It's like it's feeding off our fear directly. We need to find a way to sever its connection to us. Anyone got a pair of ethereal scissors for cutting cosmic strings? Sergei joked, his voice tinged with desperation. Trix, despite the nightmarish visions, forced herself to move. I'll see what I can do. Maybe we can jam the signal. The team worked frantically, their fears clawing at their sanity. The device's malevolent energy seemed to pulse in time with their heartbeats, as if mocking their efforts. Almost got it, Finn said, his voice steady despite the turmoil. If I can just, the temple shuddered violently, a deafening roar echoing through the chamber as the crystal's glow intensified. The nightmares crescendoed, threatening to overwhelm them entirely. But then, with a final, desperate maneuver, Trix managed to reroute the device's energy flow. The crystal flickered, its glow dimming as the connection wavered. Now, Finn, Lyra shouted, her voice barely cutting through the chaos. Finn triggered the override, the device sputtering as it struggled against their interference. The energy flow faltered, the nightmares retreating like a tide rolling back from the shore. The temple fell silent, its oppressive weight lifting as the device powered down. The crew stood there, breathless and battered but victorious. Did we do it? Caldwell asked, his voice raw from the ordeal. Looks like it, Lyra replied, her relief palpable. But let's not stick around to find out if it's got a second wind. As they exited the temple, the sense of freedom was almost intoxicating. The darkness no longer seemed hostile, the shadows no longer whispered threats. They were free. Back on the SS Black Humor, the familiar hum of the engines was a soothing balm to their frayed nerves. Each crew member collapsed into their respective seats, exhaustion finally catching up to them. Well, Lyra said, breaking the silence, we managed not to die horribly in a nightmare temple. I'd call that a win. And we didn't even have to hear the alien gospel, Trix added, her voice laced with satisfaction. Finn chuckled dryly, his usual pessimism tempered by relief. I'd say we deserve a drink for that. Or 10, Sergei agreed, rubbing his temples. This headache is about to mutate into a full-blown hangover. Dr. Soli smiled wearily, grateful to be back among the living. I'll take any hangover over what the temple had in mind. Lyra set the ship's course, the stars stretching out ahead like a promise of sanity. Let's head home. We've had enough excitement for one mission. As the SS Black Humor sailed into the void, the crew's laughter echoed through the ship, a testament to their survival. They were battered and bruised, but alive, and ready to face whatever the universe had in store. The SS Black Humor drifted through space like a drunk, clinging to the last bar stool in the universe, its once smooth hum now a comforting reminder of normalcy. For a crew that had just tangoed with the temple's worst nightmares, normalcy was as rare as a politician with a moral backbone. Lyra Voss leaned back in her chair, her gaze fixed on the viewport, as if waiting for the universe to deliver a fresh batch of cosmic misfortune. Anyone else feel like we've just walked out of a particularly nasty dentist's office, with the dentist being a sadistic alien temple and our payment being our sanity? Finn Ralston chimed in, his face doing its usual milk-curdling act. Trix, forever fidgeting with a screwdriver that looked like it had seen better days, snorted. Well, at least our mental cavities are intact, or whatever's left of them, Doctor. Mira Solis, the resident voice of science and occasional doom, leaned over her console, eyes narrowed at the readout. Got a surprise for you folks. I've stumbled across an alien log buried in the temple's data streams. This might explain the whole nightmare fuel business. Nightmare fuel, Sergei repeated, shaking his head. I've always thought my dreams could power a small planet. Turns out I was right. Caldwell, with the enthusiasm of a kid who's just discovered his first swear word, perked up. An alien log. Please tell me it's not an interstellar recipe book. Nope, Dr. Solis replied, her voice laced with intrigue and a hint of dread. More of an operational manual for a dormant alien fleet. Silence hung in the air, settling like an uncomfortable family secret. Lyra rubbed her temples, feeling a headache that had nothing to do with alien temples or cosmic horrors. So let me get this straight. Our nightmares were being harvested to fuel some alien fleet, because that's not horrifying at all. Kind of gives a new meaning to fueling their dreams, doesn't it? Finn muttered, half amused, half horrified. The ship's comms sputtered to life with a crackle that sounded suspiciously like a snicker. And here I thought my nightmares were only good for ruining my sleep cycle, Sergei added, trying to keep the mood light even as the implications settled in. Well, it seems the temple was more than just a cosmic haunted house, Dr. Solis continued. The energy from our fears was being siphoned and stored. Think of it as a cosmic battery. Great, Lyra said, her sarcasm sharper than a razor. So not only were we almost scared to death, but we were also powering up some alien doomsday fleet. I feel so violated. Trix nodded, tapping her screwdriver against the console with a rhythm that suggested both annoyance and a desperate need for distraction. Figures. Get used for alien purposes and not even a thank you card. Any chance that fleet is still a bunch of cosmic paperweights? Finn asked, his tone hopeful yet resigned. Dr. Solis shrugged, her expression a blend of scientific curiosity and pragmatic dread. If the data is correct, the fleet is still dormant. But with the temple's systems waking up, who knows how long that'll last? Just our luck, Sergei sighed. We saved the universe from itself and no one will even know about it. Heroes of the silent, terrifying night. Hey, at least we won't have to deal with Yelp reviews, Trix quipped, her voice tinged with a wry grin. Caldwell rubbed his chin, his mind racing with possibilities. If we could shut down the entire system permanently, we might prevent the fleet from ever activating. Assuming we don't end up as cosmic chow ourselves, Finn added. Optimism, Finn, Lyra said dryly. It's what gets us up in the morning. The ship jolted suddenly, the kind of jolt that suggested something was trying to get their attention. Alarms blared, their shrill cries echoing through the ship's corridors. Looks like the temple's not done with us, Lyra growled, gripping the armrests of her chair. Finn, status report. Finn's fingers danced over the controls, his expression a mix of concentration and annoyance. We've got incoming. The temple's defenses are ramping up. Defenses? Sergei said, incredulous. You mean there's more than just nightmares and existential dread? Apparently so, Doctor. Solis replied, her tone cool and analytical despite the chaos. Seems like the temple's got a few more tricks up its proverbial sleeve. The SS Black humor shuddered again, the sound of metal protesting under stress filling the bridge. Any bright ideas on how to not die today? Lyra asked, her voice a mixture of sarcasm and genuine inquiry. Trix glanced up from her tinkering, something akin to inspiration sparking in her eyes. If the temple's systems are still linked to Ior's, maybe we can mess with their targeting. Like cosmic hacking? Sergei asked, intrigued. Exactly, Trix replied, a hint of a grin playing on her lips. If we jam their signals, they might not be able to lock onto us properly. Then get on it, Lyra ordered, her voice steady and authoritative. Finn, work with Trix. Let's make ourselves as invisible as possible. The crew moved with the kind of efficient chaos that came from facing death on a semi-regular basis. Finn and Trix huddled over their consoles, fingers flying as they attempted to disrupt the temple's targeting systems. Meanwhile, the rest of the crew braced for impact, each one clinging to their sanity with a combination of grit and gallows humor. So, what do you think happens if we fail? Sergei asked, his voice light despite the tension. We become part of the temple's next horror tour, Doctor. Solis said, her tone only half joking. Sounds like a blast, Finn muttered, squinting at his screen as if willing the numbers to align. Let's not make reservations just yet, Lyra said, her eyes fixed on the viewport as the temple loomed closer, its ominous glow taunting them. Trix and Finn worked in tandem, their expressions mirroring a mix of concentration and desperation. The ship continued to jolt and shudder, each movement a stark reminder of the danger they faced. Finally, Trix let out a triumphant sound. Got it, we've jammed their targeting systems. For now, anyway. Good work, Lyra said, allowing herself a small sigh of relief. Now let's see if we can make a graceful exit. The SS Black humor veered away from the temple, its engines straining against the gravitational pull of Saturn's rings. Despite the chaos, the crew managed to hold their course, each one acutely aware of how close they'd come to being cosmic footnotes in an alien history book. As the temple receded in the distance, the atmosphere on the bridge shifted from tense to cautiously optimistic. Not bad for a bunch of gritty idiots, Finn said, a hint of pride in his usually dire voice. Speak for yourself, Sergei replied, his grin wide and unabashed. I'm a sophisticated idiot. The crew chuckled, their laughter a balm for frayed nerves. Even Lyra found herself smiling, the weight of their narrow escape lifting slightly. As they drifted further from the temple, the comms crackled to life again, this time with a different, more ominous sound. It was as if the universe had one last joke to play at their expense. Captain, Dr. Solis said, her voice tinged with new concern. We're picking up an energy spike from the temple. Lyra's smile vanished. What kind of spike? The kind that suggests the temple's warming up for something big, Dr. Solis replied, her tone grim. Can't we catch a break? Sergei groaned, slumping back in his chair. Apparently not, Trix said, her expression resigned but determined. Looks like we might have to make another trip. Back to our favorite nightmare factory, Finn muttered, his sarcasm unyielding. Lyra glanced around at the team, each member worn but ready. All right, folks, you know the drill. Grab your gear and prepare for another round with the temple. With a collective groan and a few choice expletives, the crew prepared to face the temple once more. The SS Black Humor swung back towards Saturn's rings, its crew determined to put an end to the nightmare harvesting once and for all. As they approached the temple again, the glow seemed more malevolent, as if it anticipated their arrival. The shadows loomed larger, the air growing colder with every passing second. Feels like déjà vu, Sergei said, though his voice held a resilient edge. Let's hope this time we leave for good, Lyra replied, her tone resolute, but with a touch of weariness. Back inside, the temple's oppressive atmosphere was like a weight pressing down on them. They moved with determination, their previous fears replaced by a steely resolve. Don't forget, Trix reminded, her voice laced with gallows humor. If it asks about the gospel, we say no, the crew chimed in unison, their camaraderie a bright spot in the encroaching dark. Caldwell led the way, his curiosity tempered by caution as they approached the central chamber once more. The crystal at the heart of the temple pulsed ominously, its glow brightening with an almost eager energy. Time to end this, Lyra said, her voice firm, yet acknowledging the absurdity of their situation. With calculated precision, the crew set to work. The temple's defenses were more aggressive, attempting to thwart their every move. Nightmarish visions clawed at their minds, each one a vivid tapestry of their deepest fears. But this time they were ready. Each nightmare was met with determination, each vision countered with defiance. They fought not just against the temple, but against the shadows within themselves. Trix and Finn worked together, their combined expertise a force against the temple's systems. Sergei and Caldwell focused on disrupting the temple's energy flow, while Dr. Solis and Lyra coordinated their efforts. The temple seemed to react with increasing fury, its energy pulse resonating through the chamber, but the crew held firm, their unity a beacon in the dark. Finally, Trix's voice cut through the chaos. We're close, just a little more. With a final push, they overwhelmed the temple's systems, severing the connection that fueled the dormant fleet. The crystal's glow flickered and dimmed, its hold weakening. The oppressive weight lifted, leaving only silence in its wake. The crew stood there, breathless but victorious, united in their triumph. Did we do it? Sergei asked, his voice a mix of disbelief and hope. We did, Lyra confirmed, her relief palpable. Let's get out of here before it changes its mind. As they made their way back to the ship, the crew carried with them a hard-won sense of accomplishment. The universe was still a mess, still a breeding ground for cosmic horrors, but for now they'd earned a small reprieve. Back on the SS Black Humor, the familiar hum of the engines greeted them like an old friend. They settled into their seats, exhaustion giving way to relief. Good work, everyone, Lyra said, her voice warm despite her fatigue. We might be gritty idiots, but we're damn good ones. With a shared sense of satisfaction, the crew set their sights on the stars, ready to face whatever madness the universe had in store. The SS Black Humor was a ship held together by little more than duct tape and the stubbornness of its crew, and that stubbornness was being tested to its limits. Lyra Voss, captain by default rather than design, stared blankly at the hologram of the temple, imagining it flipping them the cosmic bird. It was a testament to their resilience, or stupidity, that they were considering another round with the damned thing. We're all gonna die, aren't we? Finn Ralston drawled, his voice dripping with irony as he lounged in his seat. He looked like someone who'd seen the end of the universe and found it wasn't worth the bus fare. Not today, Finn. Tomorrow's looking pretty good, though, Lyra replied, eyeing the blinking consoles with a mixture of dread and resignation. Cheer up, Trix piped in, her fingers never still, fiddling with her favorite old screwdriver. Think of it as what? Another opportunity to not suck, Sergei snorted, casting a glance at the viewport. If my dreams are any indication, this is just a warm-up. I'm pretty sure I powered an entire alien fleet just by dreaming about my ex. That's the spirit, Lyra said dryly. We're not just here to die, we're here to die creatively. Trix shrugged, a lopsided grin playing on her lips. At least we'll go down in history, probably as a warning rather than an example. Does it count as history if no one's around to remember it? Caldwell mused, his enthusiasm now a shadow of its former self, worn down by the relentless grind of dread and despair. Semantics, Doctor. Mira Solis chimed in, her voice a blend of clinical detachment and gallows humor. We're part of a grand cosmic joke anyway. Might as well laugh on the way out. The ship shuddered, a not-so-gentle reminder that their situation was far from humorous. The temple's ominous glow hung over them, an ever-present reminder of their predicament. Lyra rubbed her temples, trying to massage away the impending headache. All right, focus up, she ordered, trying to inject some semblance of authority into the chaos. We've got to figure out how to dismantle the temple's systems for good or make sure it never wakes up again. And we do that how? Finn asked, shooting a skeptical look at the blinking lights around them. Magic, sacrifice. Turning it off and on again, turning it off and on again would be great if we had a bloody clue where the off button was, Trix muttered, her fingers dancing over the console in search of inspiration. We've tried logic, we've tried brute force, Sergei said, leaning back with the air of someone resigned to his fate. What's left? Pleading. Begging, let's not rule out crying, Caldwell added, his usually chipper demeanor now dangerously close to cracking. Right, keep it together, folks, Lyra said, injecting steel into her voice, but even she could feel the edges of her sanity fraying. The temple was like a bad joke that wouldn't end, each attempt to escape only leading them deeper into its madness. As if on cue, the comms crackled again, spewing garbled nonsense that was likely ancient blasphemy. It was a sound that gnawed at the edges of the mind, an audio equivalent of nails on a chalkboard from the depths of the abyss. Trix blinked rapidly, trying to shake off the noise-induced migraine forming. I swear if that thing starts singing, I'm launching myself out the airlock. Only if you take the rest of us with you, Finn quipped, his expression a perfect blend of smirk and scowl. Enough, Lyra snapped, her patience as worn as the ship's hull. We need to refocus. Suggestions? Could try humor, Sergei suggested, only half joking. Laughter is the best medicine, right? Maybe it's also a good weapon against ancient alien temples. Or we could try feeding it, Sergei, Finn offered. Might choke on all the sarcasm. Or, hear me out, we actually do something productive, Dr. Solis interjected, her eyes narrowing at the bickering around her. We need to identify what's powering the temple and shut it down without killing ourselves in the process. You say that like it's easy, Caldwell replied, the spark of his enthusiasm buried under layers of cynicism. Nobody said it was easy, Trix remarked, her voice carrying a tired edge, but we're not exactly spoiled for options here. Lyra exhaled slowly, trying to gather her scattered thoughts. Okay, let's think back. The temple harvested our nightmares, powered itself off our fear. What if we feed it something different? Like what, happy thoughts? Sergei asked, incredulous. In case you haven't noticed, we're fresh out. Take away its fuel, Dr. Solis suggested, her mind working through the problem like a puzzle. If it feeds off fear, maybe we starve it by not being afraid. Right, because that's totally doable, Finn snarked, his disbelief practically tangible. Could work, Trix said, surprising even herself with the optimism in her voice. We've faced worse. Lyra nodded slowly, the kernel of a plan forming. So we fake it till we make it. Convince ourselves we're not afraid and hope the temple can't tell the difference. And if it fails, Finn asked, folding his arms with a skeptical arch of his eyebrow, then we do the only thing we know how to do well, Lyra replied, a grim smile on her lips. We run, with a newfound determination, albeit tinged with desperation, the crew set about their task. They shared stories, recounted the wildest, most ludicrous adventures of their pasts, laughing until the tension in the air lessened, even if only slightly. Sergei recounted the time he'd outdrunk an entire crew of miners from Io, painting a picture so vivid and ridiculous that even Finn had to chuckle. Caldwell shared his ill-fated attempt at cooking a gourmet meal from canned rations, ending in an explosion that had permanently stained the mess hall ceiling. Trix, ever the tinkerer, described her efforts to build a robot companion out of spare parts, which ended up more like a homicidal toaster than a helpful assistant. Dr. Solis offered her own tale, a dry recounting of a scientific conference that had gone so disastrously awry it involved a fire, a stolen shuttle, and 3 missing scientists, one of whom was her. Each story was a thread in the tapestry of their shared experience, weaving them closer together even as the temple loomed over them like a malevolent ghost. Lyra listened, contributing her own misadventures, and found herself laughing more genuinely than she had in what felt like years. It was a fragile reprieve, a fleeting moment of camaraderie in the shadow of their impending doom. As the laughter waned, they focused on their task. Finn and Trix worked to isolate the temple's energy signatures, trying to disrupt its systems from within. Sergei and Caldwell focused on rerouting power, their movements precise and calculated, a dance they knew all too well. Dr. Solis and Lyra monitored the temple's reactions, watching for any sign of change, any indication that their plan was working. The ship shuddered again, the metal groaning like a beast in pain, but the crew held fast. Their laughter was a weapon, their stories a shield against the temple's dark influence. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, the oppressive weight began to lift. The temple's glow dimmed, its energy faltering in the face of the crew's unexpected resilience. It was as if the temple, ancient and unknowable, couldn't quite process this new emotion, this sheer bloody-mindedness. But the battle was not over. The temple's defenses were formidable, its systems ancient and cunning. The atmosphere in the ship remained tense, the crew balancing on the razor's edge of hope and despair. Almost there, Trix said, her voice barely above a whisper, her concentration absolute. Stay on target, Lyra urged, her own voice steady despite the knots in her stomach. Minutes stretched into an eternity, each second a test of their endurance, their sanity. The temple fought back, its systems flaring with renewed intensity, a final act of defiance against its would-be conquerors. But the crew was relentless, their resolve unyielding. Their shared laughter, their shared stories, had forged a bond that was stronger than fear, stronger than the temple's malign influence. Finally, with a triumphant cry, Trix announced, "Got it. The systems are down." The temple's glow faded, its systems collapsing under the weight of their defiance. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, leaving behind a silence that was almost deafening in its relief. "Did we do it?" Sergei asked, his voice barely daring to hope. "We did," Lyra confirmed, her own voice thick with emotion. "Let's get out of here before it decides to reboot." Back on the SS Black Humor, the crew settled into their seats, exhaustion etched into every line of their faces. They had faced the impossible and emerged victorious, at least for now. "Good work, everyone," Lyra said, her voice filled with a pride that was hard-won. "We might be gritty idiots, but we're gritty idiots who survived." As the ship pulled away from the temple, the universe stretched out before them, a vast expanse of stars and possibilities. It was still a mess, still unpredictable, but for this moment it was theirs. "So, what's next?" Finn asked, his voice carrying a hint of hope. "Anywhere but here," Lyra replied, her smile tired but genuine. The SS Black Humor sailed on, its crew united by their shared struggles, their shared laughter echoing in the vastness of space. They were battered, bruised, but unbeaten, ready to face whatever madness the universe had in store. The SS Black Humor limped through the void, its joints groaning like an old man's knees in winter. The crew, battered but not broken, huddled around the ship's dimly lit console. Finn Ralston's face was a study in concentration, a furrowed brow that suggested he was either plotting their salvation or planning a particularly elaborate prank. "All right, everyone, listen up," Finn announced, waving his hand like a maestro conducting an orchestra of cynicism. "I've got a plan, great." "Is it going to get us killed faster or slower?" Sergei asked, reclining in his chair like a man who'd abandoned all hope of comfort. "Faster, probably." But more stylishly, Finn replied, flashing a grin that suggested he was only half joking. "We're going to reverse engineer the alien tech." Lyra Voss, the captain by default and sanity by committee, raised an eyebrow. "Reverse engineer, huh? Just like when you tried to improve the coffee maker and nearly blew a hole in the mess hall. One time, Lyra. One time," Finn muttered, looking slightly defensive. "Besides, this time I've got a plan. We disrupt whatever process is converting our nightmares into, I dunno, alien fuel or whatever, right?" "Because that sounds like the sort of thing we can pull off without a manual," Trix chimed in, her trusty screwdriver twirling between her fingers like a tiny baton of optimism. Caldwell, who wore his cynicism like a second skin, shrugged. "Well, if we fail, at least we'll have the satisfaction of knowing we tried. And possibly detonated a few things in the process. Always count on Caldwell to find the silver lining in a mushroom cloud," Sergei quipped, earning a smirk from the man himself. Dr. Mira Solis leaned in, her clinical gaze sweeping over the crew with the detached interest of someone observing a particularly fascinating experiment. "We need to isolate the specific frequencies the temple uses to convert our dreams. If we can disrupt those, we might have a shot." "Sounds easy enough," Trix said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Just need a few wires, some duct tape, and a miracle. Plus, we get to go back inside that creepy place," Sergei added, his sarcasm as thick as the air in the ship. What a treat. Finn started pulling open panels, revealing a mess of wires that looked more like a rat's nest than a sophisticated piece of alien technology. "Trix, I need you on this. If anyone can turn a homicidal toaster into a friend, it's you." Trix nodded, rolling up her sleeves with the determination of someone about to wrestle a particularly stubborn piece of machinery. "I'll do my best. But if this thing starts singing Kumbaya, I'm out." Lyra clapped her hands together, her mind already working through the logistics. "Okay, while Trix and Finn work on the tech, the rest of us need to prepare for another trip to the temple. We need to be ready to shut it down from inside if this plan goes south, which it probably will," Sergei pointed out, earning an affirming nod from Caldwell. "Meanwhile, I'll keep an eye on Trix and Finn," Dr. Solis said, a hint of a smile on her lips. "Make sure they don't accidentally open a portal to another dimension or something." Yeah, no pressure," Finn muttered, already elbows deep in wires and circuits. The crew dispersed, each member diving into their task with the grim determination of a band of misfits who had survived too much to quit now. Hours passed, the ship filled with the sounds of tools clinking and muttered curses. The tension was palpable, like a storm gathering strength, but beneath it all was a current of camaraderie, an unspoken understanding that this, too, was just another challenge to laugh in the face of. Finally, Trix stepped back, wiping her greasy hands on her pants. "I think we've got it. I've rerouted the frequencies to disrupt the nightmares, at least in theory," Lyra asked, her eyebrow arching upwards. Hey, it's better than not at all, Trix replied, a crooked grin on her face. Finn, looking slightly more hopeful than he had any right to be, nodded. All right then, let's do this. Everyone ready, define ready, Caldwell interjected, his tone dry enough to rival the most arid desserts. Ready to not die, Sergei answered for him, clapping Caldwell on the back. With the kind of resolve that comes only from having faced too many absurdities to count, the crew suited up and prepared for another jaunt into the bowels of the temple. The oppressive structure loomed ahead, its dark spires piercing the void like the universe's most ominous welcome sign. Remember, folks, Finn said as they approached the entrance, if it asks if we want to hear the gospel, say no. Noted, Sergei said, rolling his eyes. How could we forget what, with all the subtlety inside, the temple was as eerie and unsettling as they remembered. Shadows danced along the walls, the air buzzed with an energy that was both ancient and malevolent. The crew moved cautiously, every step echoing like a gunshot in the silence. All right, Trix, let's plug this thing in and see if we can make a dent, Finn said, gesturing to the mass of wires and makeshift tech they'd cobbled together. Trix nodded, her fingers deftly connecting wires and flipping switches with the precision of someone who'd been born to tinker. Okay. Let's hope this doesn't backfire. Famous last words, Caldwell commented from his post by the entrance, keeping watch like a particularly sarcastic sentinel. The device hummed to life, a low thrum that seemed to vibrate through the very walls of the temple. For a moment, nothing happened, and then slowly, the oppressive weight that had settled over them began to lift, like a fog dissipating under the morning sun. It's working, Dr. Solis observed, her voice tinged with disbelief. But for how long? Sergei asked, ever the pessimist. This thing's got more tricks up its sleeve than a magician on payday, long enough for us to make a break for it, hopefully, Lyra said, already calculating their escape route. The temple seemed to shudder, its ancient systems straining under the unexpected assault of human ingenuity. The crew moved quickly, their movements a coordinated dance of desperation and determination. What's that noise? Trix asked, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. A low rumble began to resonate through the temple, growing louder with each passing second. It was a sound like the universe clearing its throat before delivering the punchline to a cosmic joke. Time to go, Lyra shouted, her voice barely audible above the cacophony. The crew bolted, racing through the twisting corridors with all the urgency of people who'd discovered the building was on fire. Behind them, the temple seemed to wail in protest, its systems struggling and failing against the onslaught. Who knew a bit of reverse engineering could cause such a fuss? Caldwell remarked, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Maybe it just doesn't like uninvited guests, Sergei replied, his feet pounding against the metal floor. They burst out of the temple, the vastness of space greeting them like a breath of fresh air. The sight of the SS Black Humor was a welcome relief, its battered hull a promise of safety and sanity, or at least their version of it. Get us out of here, Lyra, Finn called, already clambering aboard. The ship's engines roared to life, propelling them away from the temple with all the speed they could muster. The crew collapsed into their seats, exhaustion and adrenaline warring for dominance. Well, that was fun, Sergei said, his voice drenched in sarcasm. Let's never do that again, agreed, Lyra said, adjusting their course with a steady hand. But at least we proved we could outsmart an ancient alien temple, temporarily at least, Dr. Solis noted, ever the realist. Does it count as a win if you're not sure you won? Trix asked, leaning back and closing her eyes. Finn chuckled, a tired but genuine sound, in this universe. Absolutely, as the SS Black Humor sailed away from the chaos, the crew found themselves once again surrounded by the vastness of space. It was a familiar void, full of uncertainty and potential danger, but it was theirs to navigate. What's next, Captain? Caldwell asked, his voice carrying a hint of newfound respect. Lyra paused, glancing around at her ragtag crew, these mismatched survivors who somehow managed to keep laughing in the face of chaos. Next, we find a nice, quiet corner of the universe, maybe even catch our breath for a minute. Quiet, huh? Sergei said, a small smile playing at his lips. Seems a bit out of character for us. Maybe, Lyra replied, her own smile mirroring his. But we've earned it. The SS Black Humor continued its journey, a tiny speck in the vastness of space, driven by the indomitable spirit of its crew. They were battered, bruised, but unbeaten, ready to face whatever madness awaited them in the dark. And as they sailed into the unknown, their laughter echoed around them, a defiant sound in a universe that never seemed to run out of surprises. The SS Black Humor floated in the void, a junkyard of hope and wiring, as its crew gathered in the main hold, which doubled as their makeshift war room. Lyra Voss stood at the center, a captain by default, because the universe had a twisted sense of humor when it came to leadership. Her crew, a ragtag band of misfits and lost souls, surrounded her, each wearing their own brand of cynicism like a well-tailored suit. All right, listen up, Lyra began, her tone as dry as a Martian desert. We're going back into the temple. I know it didn't exactly roll out the welcome mat last time, but we need to shut down that nightmare-fueled fleet before it wakes up and starts asking for breakfast. By breakfast, you mean us, right? Sergey chimed in, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Because I'm not on the menu. Relax, Sergey, Finn Ralston said, leaning against a bulkhead with the kind of nonchalance that only comes from someone who's one prank away from mutiny. We're just going to poke a few buttons and hope we don't accidentally become the main course. Great plan, Caldwell added, his words laced with enough dry humor to dehydrate a cactus. Poke, prod, hope, not exactly the three pillars of a solid strategy. Maybe not, Lyra conceded with a wry grin, but we're short on time, long on nightmares, and fresh out of better ideas. Trix, their resident optimist, or the closest thing they had to one, was already fiddling with a handheld scanner, her fingers dancing over buttons with the grace of a pianist playing a particularly chaotic symphony. I've got the frequency disruptor ready. It'll scramble those nightmares like eggs in a blender. And if it doesn't, Dr. Mira Solis asked from the corner, her clinical detachment a stark contrast to the chaos surrounding her. Then we might get an involuntary tour of Saturn's rings, Trix replied with a shrug. But hey, at least the view will be nice, assuming we have time to appreciate it before we're vaporized, Sergey said, crossing his arms. Lyra gave her crew a once-over. They were a squabbling, sarcastic bundle of nerves and energy, but they were her squabbling, sarcastic bundle of nerves and energy. All right, let's gear up and get this over with. As they suited up, the familiar sounds of Velcro and zippers filled the air, a prelude to disaster they had grown almost fond of. Each of them carried their own piece of the plan. Trix with her disruptor, Sergey with a satchel full of explosives, just in case, and Finn with a toolkit that had seen more action than most soldiers. The temple loomed ahead as they exited the ship, its dark spires reaching into space like the bony fingers of some ancient giant trying to reclaim what was once its own. This place gives me the creeps, Trix muttered, her voice barely a whisper over the comms. Think of it as a haunted house, Finn suggested, ever the one to find humor in horror. Except instead of ghosts, you've got ancient alien nightmares. Reassuring, Dr. Solis replied dryly. We're here to stop the harvesting, not become the next haunted attraction. Inside, the temple was just as foreboding as they remembered. The air was thick with the tension of 1,000 unsaid words, and shadows played along the walls like dancers in a macabre waltz. All right, Lyra said, pulling up the holographic map they'd pilfered from the temple's database. We need to get to the control room, shut down the systems, and hope we don't trip over anything that'll start Armageddon. Piece of cake, Finn said, earning a glare from Sergey. If that cake's laced with arsenic, Sergey shot back. They moved through the hallways with the kind of caution that came from repeated near-death experiences. Every creak and groan of the ancient structure seemed to mock their efforts, a cosmic laugh track for their perilous journey. Here we are, Trix announced as they reached the temple's core, a room filled with consoles and displays that hummed with dormant power. Let's hope this thing is as simple as flipping a switch. As she set to work, her fingers flying over the controls, the others kept watch, their eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of trouble. Anything? Lyra asked, her voice tense. Almost, Trix replied, her tongue peeking out between her lips in concentration. Just need to bypass a few. She was cut off by a sudden blaring alarm, the room flooding with an angry red light. That wasn't me, Trix quickly added, holding her hands up defensively. Of course not, Sergey muttered, checking the safety on his blaster. The universe just hates us that much. Focus, Lyra snapped, moving to help Trix. Can you shut it off? Trying, Trix replied, her voice a mix of frustration and determination. But these systems are like a Rubik's Cube on steroids. Then solve it, Lyra said, her voice hard. As if the universe decided to add insult to injury, the temple began to shudder, its ancient walls groaning under the strain. Well, that's unsettling, Caldwell said, bracing himself against a console. What now, Captain? Now we improvise, Lyra said, her mind racing. Trix, keep working on those controls. Finn, Sergey, see if you can rig something to blow if we need to make a quick exit. Just like old times, Finn said with a grin, setting to work with Sergey. Except the stakes are higher and the odds worse, Sergey replied, already pulling explosives from his satchel. Doctor Solis, ever the calm in the storm, monitored the situation from the back, her eyes flicking between the crew and the data streaming on her tablet. Temple's systems are trying to reboot the fleet. We're running out of time. No pressure then, Trix said, her voice tight with concentration as she continued her work. Got it. The sudden silence that followed was almost deafening. The alarms cut off, the lights returned to their cold, neutral white, and the oppressive sense of impending doom lifted like a morning mist. Great job, Trix, Lyra said, relief evident in her voice. Is the fleet down? Disabled, Trix confirmed, her grin wide and triumphant. But we need to leave like now. I may have set something else off in the process. Of course you did, Sergey said with a resigned sigh. Nothing's ever easy, is it? Where's the fun in that? Finn quipped, already packing up his tools. The temple began to shake violently, pieces of the ceiling crumbling down around them. Time to go, people, Lyra shouted, motioning for them to follow her. They raced through the corridors, the temple's death throes echoing around them. The path back seemed longer than before, every step a gamble as debris rained down like the universe's worst confetti. Is this thing gonna collapse on us? Caldwell called, dodging a falling beam with the grace of a man who'd narrowly avoided disaster one too many times. We've got just enough time, Dr. Solis said, her voice calm despite the chaos. Probably reassuring, Sergei grumbled, pushing himself to run faster. The exit loomed ahead, a rectangle of light promising escape. They burst through it, the oppressive weight of the temple finally releasing them as they stumbled back onto the surface. SS Black Humor opened the hatch. Lyra barked into her comms, and the ship complied, its ramp lowering with a mechanical whine. They clambered aboard, each of them collapsing into seats with varying degrees of grace and exhaustion. Trix was the last one in, slamming the ramp control with a satisfying thud. Lyra, get us the hell out of here, Finn said, panting as he strapped himself in. With pleasure, Lyra replied, her hands flying over the controls. The SS Black Humor roared to life, its engines pushing them away from the collapsing temple with all the urgency of a fleeing prey. Did we really just pull that off? Trix asked, disbelief coloring her voice. Seems so, Dr. Solis replied, a rare hint of a smile on her lips. Guess that makes us miracle workers, Finn said, reclining as if he hadn't just escaped a collapsing alien death trap. Or just lucky idiots, Sergei countered, his arms crossed as he watched the temple recede into the distance. Caldwell let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Lucky, definitely. Idiots, no comment. The temple continued to crumble behind them, its spires folding and collapsing into the void like the last act of a tragic opera. The crew watched it disappear, a mix of relief and exhaustion settling over them. Well, that was something, Lyra said, adjusting their course. Yeah, Sergei agreed, his voice softening. Something that could have killed us, again. Hey, we made it, Trix pointed out, her optimism shining through the grime and fatigue. And we saved the universe. Sort of. True, Finn said, a grin tugging at his lips. We did something good, for once, Caldwell added, smirking. Lyra looked around at her crew, a mismatched band of survivors who'd somehow managed to defy the odds once more. All right, let's find somewhere quiet to catch our breath. Quiet, Sergei echoed, settling back in his seat. That'll be a nice change. As the SS Black Humor sailed into the depths of space, its crew finally allowed themselves a moment to breathe. The universe was vast and unforgiving, but for now they had each other, and that was enough. Their laughter, a sound of triumph and camaraderie, echoed in the small confines of their ship, a beacon of hope in a cosmos that never stopped testing them. And for this ragtag crew, that was more than they could ever ask for. The SS Black Humor cruised through the void, the galaxy's most dubious dive bar on autopilot. Lyra sat in the captain's seat, her usual perch of stress and decisions. The dashboard flickered like a dying neon sign, a fitting testament to their journey through chaos and calamity. Finn settled into his chair with a groan, rubbing his temples. I swear one day we'll have a mission that doesn't involve temples and ancient death traps. Yeah, maybe next time we'll just get stuck in a black hole, Sergei quipped, stretching his legs out. Nice and relaxing. Don't jinx it, Trix said, fiddling with her handheld scanner like it was a child's toy. We've already tempted fate enough for one lifetime. Fate's got a sick sense of humor, Lyra said, smirking. Surprised it hasn't sent us a bill for damages yet. As they drifted away from the collapsing temple, the ship's comms crackled to life, a static-filled symphony. Caldwell fiddled with the controls, trying to improve the connection. Earth's not gonna believe this report, he said, shaking his head. Alien nightmares, ancient temples, and a doomsday fleet fueled by bad dreams. Sounds like a bad sci-fi movie, or a Tuesday for us, Lyra replied, leaning back. Send it anyway. Let the brass sort out the fiction from the fact, Doctor. Mira Solis stood by the console, her usual aura of clinical detachment softened by a hint of satisfaction. If nothing else, our findings should ensure humanity is prepared should another threat like this arise, assuming they don't just laugh us off, Sergei added, ever the pessimist. But they'll think we've been hitting the space gin. Let them, Lyra said. We did what we set out to do. Saved the universe one nightmare at a time. Trix shot her a thumbs up, and we didn't even get vaporized. That's gotta count for something. Survival is the best kind of success, Finn agreed, tapping his fingers on the armrest. Even if it involves dodging alien nightmare fuel. With a few deft movements, Caldwell began transmitting their data back to Earth. All right, sending now. Let's hope they listen. Or at least don't send us the interstellar equivalent of a restraining order. As the report zipped through the cosmos, the crew lapsed into a comfortable silence, the hum of the ship a soothing backdrop. It was a rare moment of peace, a chance to reflect on what they'd achieved and survived. Lyra looked around at her crew, a mismatched band of misfits who somehow made it through. We did good, folks. For all our bickering and bad jokes, we pulled it off, damn right, Sergey said, cracking a smile. Guess even the universe can't stand against human stubbornness or stupidity, Caldwell chimed in, grinning. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. Hey, don't knock it, Trix said, pointing a finger. It's kept us alive this long, Doctor. Solis nodded, a rare agreement from the most reserved of them all. Adaptability and resilience. Humanity's greatest strengths or our most entertaining flaws, Finn added, chuckling. Depends on how you look at it. Silence settled again, the kind that spoke volumes without saying a word. They were a crew forged in the fires of cosmic chaos, and each of them knew it. The universe had thrown everything it could at them, and yet they were still here, still standing. Lyra turned her attention back to the stars, the endless sea of possibility stretching out before them. All right, let's find a nice, quiet spot to lay low for a while. Maybe somewhere with less existential dread, space Bahamas, Sergey suggested, raising an eyebrow. Or is that too optimistic, Trix snorted. Anywhere's better than a crumbling death temple. All right, Lyra said, plotting their course. Let's put some distance between us and that nightmare factory. Who knows, maybe we'll find a place that doesn't try to kill us every 5 minutes. As the SS Black Humor powered forward, the crew settled into their respective spaces, a sense of accomplishment hanging in the air like the sweet smell of victory and the faint odor of burnt wiring. Finn glanced around, taking in the familiar faces that had become his makeshift family. You know, he said, breaking the quiet, it's not every day you save the universe and live to tell about it. We'll add it to the resume, Sergey replied deadpan, along with expert in dodging death and professional sarcasm. Hey, speaking of resumes, Trix said, her eyes lighting up with mischief. Think we can put intergalactic heroes on there. Might help with future gigs. Only if we survive long enough to retire, Caldwell said with a laugh. Might be a while at this rate. Lyra chuckled, shaking her head. Whatever we call it, we did good. And no one can take that from us, Doctor. Solis nodded, her expression softening. Indeed, we've proven ourselves capable. Together, Finn echoed, raising an imaginary glass, to surviving against all odds, and maybe finding a nice, quiet corner of the universe to do it in. They raised their hands in a mock toast, their laughter echoing in the small confines of their ship. It was a sound of triumph, of camaraderie, of human spirit enduring against all odds. As the SS Black Humor sailed through the stars, the crew allowed themselves a moment to savor their victory, a small, fleeting triumph in a universe that never stopped testing them. And in that moment, they knew they could face whatever came next. Together, with renewed determination, they set their course for the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Because for this ragtag crew, the universe was just another adversary to outsmart, another joke waiting to be told, and as long as they had each other, they were unstoppable.